Let us now move on to our next intriguing session, a case study presentation on blend of creativity and technology by none other than Rahul M. Alindib Akbar, Director Design, IBM Global Industries Solution.
English social reformer and pioneer of modern nursing, Florence Nightingale was facing a problem as she was trying to convince the authority about the importance of good sanitization at the hospitals and stop the spread of diseases. Now, at that time, germ theory was inexistent, and Nightingale was fighting against medical authorities and officials and generals, and they were all against her theory. But she had a secret weapon. She actually was a data geek, and she came up with this infograph. So this chart was showing the main reason behind mortality in the army of the East at that time. She pioneered data visualization in 1855, and because of this chart right here that you can see, her story was more believable and more impactful, and she was able to convince everyone about the fact that good sanitization and hygiene at the hospitals saves lives. The point is, she did this 130 years before the first Microsoft Excel was released back in 1985. And this story never fails to impress me, and I consider her as a creative and a technologist. Alright, so how's it going, everyone? I guess welcome to my room. It's a little weird because it's a pre-recorded session and I don't see anyone. I cannot see anyone and there's no interaction, and I kind of don't like that, but it is what it is. So my name is Rahul Akbar, and for the next 25 to 30 minutes I'll be talking about a little bit about how I became sort of a creative technologist from creative marketeer, and also about the little pebbles I've picked up along the way. A quick intro to my role, what I do. I've been leading the design team for IBM Global Industry Solutions since 2015. Now, IBM is the oldest tech company in the world, and it has literally more than a century old, and has always been in the business of transformation. This means oftentimes our team takes the first step. Most of the time, my team takes the first stab at a problem, creating the very first prototype with the newest technology. In other words, we work with the future and surf the wave of transformation, if you may. I personally love it. It's very dynamic, very creative, and I enjoy it a lot. My team works in a kind of innovation lab / microproduct design studio kind of environment, and we work with things like blockchain to AI to IoT, and hybrid cloud is pretty big right now. What else? AR, VR, and all the usual suspects. So this is a snapshot of my life, pretty much in one single view. It's not 100% accurate, but I tried my best. I'll not go through this in detail, but I can tell a little bit about how my journey started. So I started my journey as an advertising creative in the Bangladeshi advertising industry. Worked at Cogito for 5 years and at Gray for about a year, and was able to work with the biggest brands at the time. I was lucky enough to do so. Then moved to USA around 2010, worked at TI, and that's when I pretty much started to focus on interaction design and human factors and human-computer interactions and more complex problems. Afterwards, ran my own little studio Then since 2015, I've been working with IBM. Now, in this path, the biggest obstacle was my fear of complex technology, because that used to intimidate me a lot, because I have a business background, and I was a graphics designer when I started, so all this technology was very intimidating for me, and rightly so, because technology is complex. So the way I was able to manage my fear of technology is by understanding this particular basic fact that every complex thing is a combination of tiny little simple thing. So every time I try to remember that, every time I face something, I try to recall this line, and that gave me a lot of hope and courage on my journey. So yeah, I had to practice to learn to embrace complexity, as well as embracing ambiguity. In times of transformation, there is ambiguity everywhere, and that's right now is the era of, as I said, beautiful chaos. So I also had to learn how to deal with ambiguity that comes with technology, while ideating or solutioning on a shifting landscape. It becomes very important. So ideating for innovation is like capturing the elusive and beautifully ambiguous mist to convert the water particles into ice cubes, if you may, and ultimately to beautiful ice sculptures. So I talked about picking up pebbles in my journey, and these are the pebbles in my pocket that I'd like to talk about right now. I'll go through them one by one, and let's see if it all makes sense to y'all. And I realized I was slowly transforming my own mindset, growing from a communication-centric mindset towards a more of a solution-centric thinking with almost no boundaries that contributes to the overall human experience that a business can offer, if that makes sense. For example, as I said in the beginning, instead of communicating her hypothesis over and over again through traditional methods, what Miss Nightingale did was that she came up with a method that was very new at the time, to convey the communication in a rather impactful way. So that, again, to me is very solution-oriented thinking. Then secondly, I realized that just like in advertising, story stays very, very important in technology as well. We as human beings are, storytelling creatures, and no matter how complicated a technology gets or how ambiguous it gets, we always try to understand it through stories and metaphors. So it is amazing how traditional techniques like three-act structures or metaphors, etc., are used to make it easy to explain a complex system. For example, I was very interested to understand quantum computing, but it was very difficult for me to understand. IBM's quantum computers were making progress. We were making news with IBM Q, so I also wanted to, learn about quantum computation at that point. But I found it, my background is not physics, and I found it very difficult to understand what it meant until I found this metaphor to explain quantum computation to a kid. in a traditional binary system, we have zeros and ones, right? So think of a coin. We have heads and tails, and think of heads as zeros and tails as maybe one. In quantum environment, we have a third state that's both 0 and 1. So imagine this: if you have a coin and you have 0 and 1, which is heads and tails, right? A head and a tail. And then what could be the third state? So how they explained it is like the third state is the coin spinning. So it's both 1 and 0. And that's how quantum computer works with that with the qubit state. So this is how they've used metaphors, which is a storytelling technique, to explain something complicated like quantum computing in a very, very simple manner. Human experience as a whole makes the business. User experience and customer experience used to be separate from brand management. But they're becoming more and more closer together over time, and it's becoming more important to architect the experience as a whole. As a result, UX, user experience, brand experience, customer experience, all these teams are having to work together, and oftentimes they're having to do it under the brand team, because unless they all work the same way and convey the same message or give the same experience, all together, it's not a synchronized experience for the users or the customers. For example, I always find it extremely satisfying to unbox an Apple product, but it is so because it is designed that way. Apple design team also tries to make sure that the sensation or the experience is carried forward all along the way to the product user experience, and all of it altogether contributes to a great deal to their brand experience. So when we see shamelessly repetitive product placement, or let's say a brand showing up every 10 seconds within in a YouTube video, for example, regardless how creative that that brand's communication is it really creating a good experience for our people? So things like those are coming into play more and more. To me, Da Vinci was the world's greatest creative technologist. He was creative, he was inventor, he was an innovator as well, and was extremely meticulous in terms of doing his own research and putting his own process into play for the work he did. And most of all, he was a master of almost all trades. So in today's world, the lines between certain specializations are getting very blurry. T-shaped and F-shaped skills are in high demand, and for myself, being a jack of all trades was very easy because of my hunger to learn new things, but mostly because I come from Bangladeshi ad industry, and you sort of have to wear multiple hats there. So the mentality to be self-taught also comes in very handy. On top of which, open source movement all around the world, making resources even more accessible, are helping it quite a bit, versus the traditional academics, which are becoming more and more questionable in that realm. Having the Da Vinci mentality, it comes in very handy. The mentality of becoming, or wearing multiple hats and becoming jack of all trades and master of as many as possible, is becoming more and more handy and important in today's world. There is too much information everywhere nowadays, and too much data, too much consumption of data at the same time, on top of technological complexity and the ambiguity we talked about, and all of these overlaps, as you can see, gives us high amount of cognitive overloading, and this has become the nature of transformation though. So what we have to do is, like, therefore we are having to reinvent and invent different ways of thinking all the time, basically. And I have never been an organized thinker ever, and so all this technological intimidation really used to take me off guard. But then I started learning about, about the fact that we have all these different kinds of thinking practices in the tech industry, especially, in order for us to really tackle intent-oriented thinking process. Few of those are, like, definitely design thinking is a big one, and innovation thinking and creative thinking and architectural thinking, if you may, and all these different kind of practices and methods and formulas, if you may, are coming up every day, but they're also transforming a lot, so there's no silver bullet to it. So of course, at the same time, the best practice is the one that works for you. So what I personally do is, like, I learn about all these thinking practices, and then kind of modify them to make my own process for thinking and facilitating and ideation and so on. This is my personal favorite. So this is about good old imagination. And imagination is still more important than knowledge, and even data at this point, because data by definition is past, if you think about it. So is knowledge, I mean, with all due respect. But as of right now, human imagination is the only vessel we have that can time travel, that can travel into the future. Inventions and innovations always follow the trail of imagination. So I feel like, more we become data and AI dependent, is more we risk becoming lazy enough to lose the sight of the future because of the lack of imagination. This one is, I'm a big fan of Kubrick, and I've always been mesmerized to see the power of imagination in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, where we see iPad-like tablets and Siri-like AI and FaceTime-like communication methods. And the movie is still made in 1968, and that is like 42 years before the first iPad came out. So isn't that amazing? I always find it very, very fascinating. So finally, on a similar note, I always try to make sure that I do not get blinded by data. Yes, data is amazing. It's building our present and future. But it's also a quick and easy money for many of the businesses. So misusage or overusage of data corrupts the whole purpose and reliability of data itself, ironically. Yes, data is extremely powerful, and as we are, human are extremely lazy too. So it kind of works out. So it's kind of a easy way out. But at the same time, we need to understand that like it's there's a very thin line, and data comes with a lot of potential violations. Public data belongs to people, and private data belongs to a person, and we need to understand the boundaries between those, and what we can or cannot do, or should and should not do regarding data and AI. So overall, if we don't stay ethical with it, as we can see already, data can lead us to very dark consequences. So those were my most favorite fables so far that we just talked about. I have a few extra pointers to make towards the end. So one of which is the fact that creativity is the intent to stay inspired and stay in love despite all the sufferings. It's not talent, it's not higher intelligence. Creativity is there among everyone. As cliche as it may sound, it's a sad fact that we need to reiterate it every time we talk about creativity. So please have that state of mind, and please understand that creativity is not a profession. It's our built-in factors, if you may. My point being, life is too short to stare at a blank piece of paper. So we have to be innovative. We have to be creative in our day-to-day life, and it's fun. It's not easy, but it's fun. We have to have that intent, creative intent alive, and figure out our way into it, if that makes sense. With that, since I have some more time left, I'd like to talk about. So another point that I'd like to make is that since we are all in trouble, like literally and globally, with this pandemic that's going on all around us, and so this is the perfect time for innovation, and we are already seeing that all around us for more than a year now. So many things have changed, and so many things or innovative solutions have been implemented from grassroots level to all the way up to the big corporations. So when they say necessity is the mother of inventions, they're not wrong. In our darkest times, we do turn out to be most innovative, and there are plenty of examples of that. But this particular story comes to my mind every time, and it's from 1850s volcanic eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia, which is the biggest ever recorded volcanic activity, and it did lead to a very cloudy and very long dark summer in Europe, resulting in a lot of food crisis. So to the extent where people had to start eating their own horses to survive. So since horse was the main mode of transportation at the time, the biggest problem was many of the Europeans had to walk to their destinations, which was taking a lot of time. So, and at that time, one German inventor first came up with the concept of a bicycle. So the modern bicycle we have now actually have a very dark origin story if you think about it. But yeah, this great invention was at least influenced through great disastrous events. So with that, I'd like to conclude my talk today. I think you'd still get like 5 minutes left from these sessions, and since it's not an interactive session, I'd request you to think about the things that we talked about today, and maybe, I don't know, shoot me an email or something like that if you have any particular questions, and so on. So thank you everyone, and you all stay safe and stay awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rahul, for interesting case study presentation.